around this international amphitheater has been worthy of an armed camp, a military installation. Here is a report from Ike Patton.
From Chicago, Illinois, NBC News reports the Democratic National Convention.
No matter how hard you try, you can't stop us now.
Don't push me. Take your hands off of me unless you plan to arrest me.
I think we've got a bunch of thugs here, Dan.
I wrote when the news broke out of a sense of frustration about how the media was being talked about today and crazy accusations about fake news. And I thought, what are the historical roots of this? How do people come to think about our problems being caused by the media misrepresenting or telling untrue stories about what was happening in the world? 2023 is not 1968. There's a lot of differences, but we are still dealing with a lot of the same issues.
This isn't the first time tear gas has been fired at protesters tonight.
Police brutality, particularly against people of color.
I'm not a bad guy, man. In the car. I'm not a bad guy.
People are operating more and more on the basis of emotion.
Hell no.
People distrusting mainstream media.
One representing NBC News and the other one CBS have been roughed up as they attempted to cover these demonstrations. In both cases, it was police who roughed up the crews.
1968 was a very difficult political year. You had the Tet Offensive, which was a major moment in Vietnam. Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in June of that year. Martin Luther King was assassinated in April of that year. Back in 1968, candidates were still being chosen at conventions. They weren't just sort of TV shows put on for the Republicans or the Democrats to show off their candidate.
The price of freedom has always been high.
Mr. Chairman, most delegates to this convention do not know that thousands of young people are being beaten in the streets of Chicago.
Memory of that convention is that it was 90% police beating people. Supposedly, there were going to be something like 100,000 protesters there. Now, what actually happened was there was more like 10,000 protesters. The networks knew this is going to be more contentious. There's going to be more happening in the streets. There's going to be more floor fights in the convention hall, and that's how they covered it. However, they really underplayed the street violence until it became too much of a news story to ignore.
The Democratic Party's nomination for president was also the night of the bloodiest confrontation.
The whole world is watching, chants the crowd on this side.
The famous moment of the convention is people chanting, "The whole world is watching." The reality is, like, the whole world was watching a few hours later.
As we reported to you earlier, and this, we remind you, is not live, it is on film. This happened some time ago, 45 minutes, an hour or more ago.
Chicago Democratic Convention of 1968 was the most viewed event on television in 1968. After the convention, letters to CBS, for example, ran 11-1 against CBS, saying that they had somehow erred in covering police brutality. Commissioned a study on what happened in Chicago. It's called the Walker Report. And the Walker Report concluded that it had been a police riot in Chicago. People kind of didn't believe that report. From there to now, this idea of sort of fake news, you could say that it begins in 1968. The danger of distrust in media is that you need media to help keep your democracy functional.